Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, wherever you find your podcasts. Our guest today is returning to the show. He's Shawn P B Robinson, and he's here to celebrate a brand new series of activity books based on his AnnaLynn the Canadian Spy series. Before we invite Shawn into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Theodore's Plate, the great children's book by Stephen Wade Nebgen. One Christmas Eve, in the land of kings and knights, a weary traveler knocks on the door of a family living in the woods. The family doesn't know that this traveler is a very special guest, and that a simple act of generosity will make this the most wonderful Christmas ever. Theodore's Plate is a heartwarming and timeless read for the entire family that can be enjoyed any time of the year. Written by Stephen Wade Nebgen, Theodore's Plate tells a story that the world needs to read, with messages of hope, kindness, and love. Check it out today. Theodore's Plate by Stephen Wade Nebgen. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by The Adventures of Rosie Posey Papillon, the great book that kids and adults will love by Dr. Diana Rangavis. She's smart, she's brave, and she's friendly. Papillon is her last name, and in French it means butterfly. The Rosie Posey Papillon series was created with young readers in mind to teach them values, create and plant the seeds of future leaders, and great thinkers of tomorrow. This is a wonderful series that your kids will absolutely adore. The first book in the series, The Adventures of Rosie Posey Papillon, Friendship, revolves around the value of friendship, how important it is to be a friend, how to make friends, and how to depend on each other when in need. It's a wonderful series. You should check it out today. A great addition to any family library, Rosie Posey Papillon by Dr. Diana Rangavis. And finally, this episode is also brought to you by My Home by Heather Fontaine Youngs. As a preschool teacher for almost 2 decades in the South Bronx, Heather Fontaine Youngs has taught students about homes and the different types of homes there are all around us. She wants all of her students and children everywhere to feel included and hear about all types of topics. Heather decided that there was a need for a story that could help introduce kids to the topic of homelessness. Her hope is that the story will not only allow students to feel included, but also to help start a new conversation around homes for our youngest and most precious learners. My Home by Heather Fontaine Youngs is available at Amazon. Join us right now from Ontario in the beautiful nation of Canada. Our guest is returning to the show to celebrate a brand new activity book. It's called AnnaLynn the Canadian Spy activity book. Please welcome back to the show our friend, Shawn P B Robinson. Hey, Shawn, how are you?
Great, Jed. Thanks so much for having me on the show. It's great to be back.
We love having you here on the show. I should also mention that you also have a Jerry the Squirrel activity book that's out with AnnaLynn. And
I do, yeah.
Tell us about the books and what kind of activities we can find.
Well, I was really excited about putting these together because, as an author, you're always thinking, well, what way can I just really reach out to kids and reach out to more families and be able to kind of feed into this idea of not being on the screens all the time. And I thought, well, I've got all these pictures for these stories. Why don't I put them together? They're line drawings. Why don't I put them together into a book and have a coloring book? And that's kind of how it started. And then I thought, well, no, I should have more than that. And so I created these books. So basically the AnnaLynn the Canadian Spy has a whack of pages of just the pictures for kids to color, as well as like a little idea at the top of what it's about, and then some blank area at the bottom so that they can make up their own story about the picture. And then at the end of that, we've got crosswords, we've got kind of a word search, we've got quizzes in each of them about the stories, which are kind of a fun way to just like what's happening in this picture. And then even some create your own graphic novel areas. So there'd be an area with basically a graphic novel or like a comic, but blank. And it's like, well, why don't we create our own? Like draw it, put your speech bubbles in, and you have this area to create it. Some ideas on starting your own stories, writing your own stories. Just basically a book that a kid can take in the car or take in a restaurant or something like that, and keep themselves focused and not be playing the latest app.
That sounds like a lot of fun. I especially love that idea of create your own graphic novel.
Yeah, yeah.
That is so cool because I think it just hits kids where they are. I mean, I have memories of creating my own comic back in the day. They were about these two aliens, Mott and Slot, and one had two antennas and one had one antenna that was broken. And that was almost 100 years ago, and I still remember it. So, I mean, this sounds like something that kids would really get into.
Yeah, well, I think we are creative people. Mm-hmm. You look at that, right? And you see when kids create how much they come alive and how focused they get. You get these kids who can't focus on anything, and then you give them something they can create, and they get this almost these blinders on, and they can't think of anything else except drawing their picture or creating their story or whatever. And I think we got to feed into that, right? Because I think creative kids continue to be creative adults. Mm-hmm. And so I love that idea. To me, it's just blank. Do what you want with it. And I think one of the things we get to do is we get to give them that little push. So this graphic novel area and the thing, it's just like, hey, go at it and create your own story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of kids, and again, going back to me and myself in middle school, I don't think if I was a teacher, I would have liked having middle school Jedley in class. I know there are a couple of teachers who didn't because they were constantly putting me out of their class to the point where they finally, I don't know which genius teacher of mine figured it out, but they said, this is the work you need to do. Be quiet, get it done. And when you're done, you can go down to the library. And the library was my place, not so much to read, although I did a lot of it there, but I could create there. It was a real creative space. We could create these movies, and I could write. And when I was in the library, they loved me to the point where my librarian kept in touch with me until she passed away when I was in my late 50s. You know, and so I think we need to recognize that, you know, if you have a kid out there that has a lot of extra energy, really, if you can find a way to give them that outlet so that they can just laser focus in on this thing that they love and give them a way to create, what a gift to them. What a great way to help shift their perspective to away from thinking, oh, I have a problem, to thinking, I have a superpower. I just need to learn how to harness this so I'm not annoying everybody in the
Yeah. Well, you know, it reminds me of a story I heard about Jim Carrey when he was a kid, the actor Jim Carrey, right? Apparently what happened was, you can imagine, you see him and everything. As a kid, he might have been difficult for his teachers, right? Might have been, right? Anyways, and I guess this one teacher kind of grabbed hold of it and recognized the potential. And she said, look, here's what I'll do for you. And I think this is the story for him, is what I'll do for you is if you behave and focus during class, I'll give you the last 15 minutes of every day up at front of the class. And he just went at it, and he could do whatever he wanted. And you know, it's interesting because when he rose to fame, what was it, the early 90s or something like that, there was a point where I think he was the number one money-making actor in Hollywood, right? And I think the thing is we find these ways to invest in people, and it pays off in the long run. I'm not talking money, and that's not what I'm talking about, but it pays off in the sense that you get someone like Jim Carrey, you get someone like whoever, and they can contribute so much more, and their skills are honed, and they become what they're good at. My son actually came to me a little while ago, and he was all excited because he was reading Captain Underpants. And he mentioned in the back that he was dyslexic. And I think it was dyslexic, and he struggled with reading anyways. And he showed some of his Captain Underpants stuff to his teacher, and the teacher told him, "This is terrible." Told him, "This is just terrible. You got nothing here," right? I guess that's how it went, something like that. Anyways, and you look at that and you're like, and yet what did it become? Mm-hmm. And for my son, what an encouragement, because my son has turned around and he's like, I struggle a bit with reading. I struggle a bit with school and everything. And here's a guy that I love what he's doing. And it gave him this sense of, what can I be?
Right.
Right. And I'm sorry that I can't remember that guy's name, that he had to go through that, but it becomes this beautiful picture of I think how we need to invest in people and show them what they can be.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that idea, and what a great gift that somebody came along and invested in Dave Pilkney.
Pilkney, yeah, that's it. Yeah.
That they were able to create Captain Underpants, and that was definitely a gift to my kid when he was in middle school, and he loved it. And in fact, one of the first books that I bought my son was a book that Dave created. It was called Dogzilla.
Yeah.
And me and my son, when he was just 3 or 4, 5 years old, would just read that over and over again. And it was just so much fun. I love that idea of finding ways to invest in people. Mm-hmm. Instead of us needing to wait for somebody to come up with an idea, we go out, we do the work to find a way to invest in somebody.
Yeah. Well, people are precious, right? And I think we get in the idea that people are just people, right? But they're precious. They're gifts from God. They're a creative work walking around us. And I think we need to find ways to pour into them and not just let them know that they're important or valuable, but treat them like they're important and valuable. Like, invest in them. Like, hey, you are something pretty special. Yeah. Let's help you be what you're meant to be. Right. And I mean, we look at our own lives and how much we would have wanted more of that, and we look at those who did invest in us that way. And I think we can jump on board with that with a lot of kids around us. And so that's why with the activity books, I went through that and I thought, what can we do? So one of them had a quiz in it and the other didn't. And two of my beta readers, a couple of girls that around the 9 to 11 years of age, went over, and the one came back and she's like, I love quizzes. This other one's missing a quiz. It needs a quiz. So before it came out, it was like the second one has quizzes in it. And, well, not all kids want quizzes, but some really do. And let's find a way to really connect with each of these kids.
Well, the neat thing about an activity book is it's not going to be graded. You find something you don't like, you just kind of skip over it.
Exactly, right? And so who doesn't love to color every now and then? But you don't want to spend every moment coloring. Who doesn't love a good word search? Who doesn't love a good crossword puzzle? Who doesn't love working through these things, creating your own graphic novel? You'll find your area. And so it's been a lot of fun just to kind of get them out there. And so it was interesting because shortly after I came out with it, I was able to kind of do some real promotion in Canada. And ended up getting a whack of books going out around and stuff, which from people I didn't know, which was really great or whatever. And I just can't wait to hopefully hear back. Okay, how are the kids really taking to these books, and how are they really enjoying them?
That's awesome. Speaking of promotion, in a little while, we're gonna talk about a special promotion you're offering the listeners to the show. But before we do that, one of the things we've celebrated lately here on the podcast is the idea of intergenerational friendships and relationships. And, that was something, me growing up, I was related to everybody in my neighborhood. It was annoying to a point because I couldn't do anything wrong. But I had aunts and uncles and my grandmother, and I had a phenomenal relationship with them, especially with my grandmother. And we did tons of stuff together. And that's not the reality for most people these days. You don't live in that closed, familiar neighborhoods anymore. We're spread out. But we still want to give our kids a chance to have those intergenerational relationships with an aunt, with a grandparent. And one of the things I know is that doing word puzzles, doing those activities can be such a great thing for a kid to do with his grandparent it's great for the grandparent because a lot of them are struggling with cognitive issues. And, one of the things that doctors prescribe to people, in early stages of dementia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's is do crosswords, do word finds. And what better way to do that than with their grandkids?
Yeah. Investing in them.
Yeah.
And I think I think we've lost something because we're very peer focused, right? Find your age group with your group and stick to it, right? We've lost something because I think in times past, there was a desire to seek and gain from those older. And, so much is lost when we're just focused on our peers, when we're just focused on Google giving us the answer we need and our friends being all the support we need. And I think we need people who are older than us. For me, one of the things that I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I ended up connecting with a guy who's 35 or 40 years older than me. I'm 46, he's 82. So there's a little bit of an age gap there or whatever. We meet every 2 weeks and we just chat. And he invests in me and I try to invest in him, but I don't have an awful lot to offer him. But I mean, he invests in me and pours into me. And here's a guy who's 82 years of age, just pouring into me every 2 weeks. If I needed him, I can call him up right now. He'd be at my doorstep and just as soon as it is, I need it. And I know that, and that means the world to me. And I think we need to find ways for our kids to see those who are older than them and connect with them. And crosswords is a great way to do it. Coloring is a great way to do it. Puzzles is a great way to do it. Just where you're sitting there, shoulder to shoulder, right, doing stuff together. The term is you do life with others.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's what we need to do with cross-generational.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's so important. And I agree with you. We have lost that, especially here in the States. And I imagine in Canada, one of the things that I've commented on is when my beautiful wife and I travel through Latin America, it's very, very common to go to a concert or to a festival. Something similar here in the States, you go to a concert, everybody's the same age. Mm-hmm. Down in Latin America, you go to a concert, there are grandparents, there are kids, there are parents, and it's just everybody's having a great time, and there's much more of that intergenerational thing going on, and I really think that's something we need to bring back.
Oh, yeah. When my wife and I were first married, we attended a Portuguese church. And I'm Irish background, she's Austrian background or whatever, but we attended this Portuguese church and they had an English service because, our Portuguese is well, it doesn't exist. We just don't speak any. And so, but one of the things that I noticed right away, because I knew a lot of them, I was friends with a lot of them, but there was a family connection there, right? That was beautiful and yet shocking to kind of a Canadian mindset, right? All the generations just boom together, one group in this cohesive unit. And I think a lot of cultures today, especially like if you're dealing with Latin America or if you're dealing with, Africa, and so many cultures deal with, have kind of this intergenerational, this family connectivity. A lot of the Asian cultures are big on family and stuff, whereas we're big on isolation and individualism. And I think we've lost something very precious. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to turn around and say, hey, we need to find some connection with the older than younger. I don't want to lose connection with my kids once they realize, wait a second, this guy's older than me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No. And people with experience have a lot to offer, a lot of wisdom. And when people with experience have relationships with younger people, they have more reason to live and to get out there and to continue to live and be alive and active and alert. Yeah. Well, I think one of the advantages of youth is they talk about energy, but one of the real advantages is questioning. The younger you are, the more you question stuff. And, the older we get, the more we go comfortable. And so you've got this incredible wisdom that can be there in those who have a great deal of experience. But with the young, you question everything. And you bring those two together and you've got wisdom and an ability to question. And I mean, that's a recipe for greatness. That is,
right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know one of the things that I recall of our conversation about AnnaLynn the Canadian Spy is that as she's traveling around the beautiful nation of Canada, we get to see and we get to learn a little bit because we mention Canada like it's this big thing and it's, all the same. But Canada is a very, very diverse country.
Oh, absolutely. And we have a culture that is unique to us. It's different. And stuff, but we have things we're passionate about. And I try to bring a lot of that in. So for instance, Canadians are very passionate about hockey, for instance. We come to the Olympics and we're like, we want to win a lot of golds, but what we really want to win is hockey. Right. And that's kind of the way we approach it and stuff. And then there's things like we have a love for maple syrup, right? This idea that we produce a lot of maple syrup. I mean, the maple leaf is on our flag. That is our flag. And so I'm bringing out some of this kind of stuff into the book. So for instance, one of the books, everybody in Canada gets brainwashed to hate hockey. It's all just silliness, right? It's just a lot of fun. And she as a spy has to go and figure it out, right? And then another book, somebody starts tampering with the maple syrup. They just start watering it down. And everybody's just traumatized by it, right? And so she has to figure it out. And so what I do with that is I try to get the connectivity between another culture. So it turns out, and it's just kind of a fun way to do it. It's a Danish guy who's watering it down. So she flies to Denmark, meets with the Queen of Denmark, says, hey, what's going on? She goes, oh, no, it's a rogue agent. I'll help you with it. And so they end up working. So she meets with the Queen of Denmark. And it talks about lands in a certain spot, and there's actually a statue in one of her castles like that, right? And stuff. And then she comes back here and she ends up more or less working with her to solve this problem. And, so there's all sorts of things like that. It just kind of connect up and kind of give, an eye into Canadian culture as well as an eye into a little bit other culture. So for instance, one of the things years ago, I got the privilege of being able to hike through Iceland. And there's this one mountain, a famous mountain there called Kirkafell, and it's an unusual looking one. If you see a picture of it, you'd recognize it. I'm sure you've seen it many times, but nobody knows his name, right? But and so I got to climb that. And so in the book, I have it at one point, she's got to climb that mountain. And so I'm able to kind of walk through. There's this little house at the bottom of it. She ends up going in that house at one point and climbs up. And what it's like all this grass. And then you have this rock cliff that you have to go up, and then grass, rock cliff. It's kind of the way you kind of got to climb this thing. And, just to be able to give an eye into other nations as well as an eye into Canadian culture. And to me, it's just beautiful, right? Yeah. Let's just connect us and recognize, hey, we can do this together.
Awesome. Well, I know if people mess with the maple syrup content, that's a big problem.
It is. It hurts. It hurts us deep.
I heard that there was a real big problem around something like that in Quebec one time.
I think I remember something about that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's been fun. I'm actually in Ingersoll, Ontario, which is kind of southwestern Ontario. So one of my books, she's flying over Canada and she gets to see all these major sites in Canada. And then she looks down and she goes, and there's the most beautiful town in all of Canada, Ingersoll, Ontario, right? And I just kind of make these little references and have a lot of fun with it, right? And you get like a little glimpse in all these different places in Canada. And yeah.
That's wonderful. That's a lot of fun. Now, I teased earlier that you're doing a special promotion for the guests, for the listeners of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.
Yeah, I see. My goal with the activity books is not to make money. My goal is to get them out there. I want to get them in the hands of people. So one of the things I wanted to do was, it's only print book. To me, an activity book that's an ebook is kind of a little unusual. What do you do with it, right? So it's a print book, and I'm dropping the price down to the absolute minimum I can drop it down to. So I won't be making anything on it, but it means, say in the States, it's the activity book is the whole thing's $3.70, something like that. And in the UK, it'll be just over £3, that kind of a thing. And so just dropping it down to the absolute minimum. And I'll just leave it at that price for a week or two while the listeners can grab some copies, get some for their friends and stuff. And just a great way to be able to get it out. And I know the podcast is all over the world, right? So I drop it down to the minimum price in every Amazon region I can.
Awesome.
So yeah. And hopefully it's a great way to get kids off screens and into books for a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you are listening to this in the first 7 days of when the podcast is released, go check out Amazon and check out Anna the Canadian Spy activity book or Jerry the Squirrel's activity book by Shawn P B Robinson, and it'll be available at that lower price for you. If you're listening to this in 2023 or 24, sorry, but thanks for listening. We appreciate that. And also go to Amazon and get your copy because it sounds like it's a lot of fun and a great deal. Shawn, where else can people go to find out more about all of the books that you've created and find out more about you?
Well, the best place is my website. I run a blog on how to self-publish, how to write, encouraging authors and so forth. But you can go to ShawnPBRobinson.com/books. And it has a list of all my books. So I write all sorts of kids' books. Most of them are kind of fun fantasy books. And I also write some epic fantasy for adults, some longer books. And I usually look at as, mid-teens and up, that kind of a thing. So try to get something for all the ages. Love writing all sorts of different stuff.
Awesome. We've had a great time speaking to the author of the new activity books based on the Anna the Canadian Spy series and the Jerry the Squirrel series. And our guest has been the author, Shawn P B Robinson. Hey, Shawn, thanks so much for being back with us.
Well, thank you so much for having me on the show, and I always enjoy being here.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Christine Milkovic-Krause. She'll be here to celebrate Teddy loses his ears. That's the next episode of the podcast. Hey, if you are the author of a fantastic children's book, might I invite you to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You'll find an author's click here button at the top of the page. I think you'll want to click on that button because that button will let you know how we can help you celebrate your book. You can be a guest here on the podcast and in a long-form conversation tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. It's fun, it's easy, and it doesn't cost you a thing. Oh, you can also find out how you can submit your book to our Certified Great Read panel. If they believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read, letting folks know that your book is worthy of their consideration when they're looking to add a new book to their family library or their public library or school library. Oh, and you can also find out about our fantastic monthly promotion program. We can celebrate your book with commercials here on the podcast, with messages to our 89,000 plus social media following, and display your book on our nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards. It's still growing. We have boards in Boston, Atlanta, Albany, New York, Sacramento, California, Los Angeles, California, Hermiston, Oregon, Atlanta, and Toledo, Ohio. Oh, and we will absolutely exhibit your book and any live event that we will be part of during the month that you're involved. Learn all about that and more at readingwithyourkids.com and clicking on that author's click here button at the top of the page. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Shawn P B Robinson. Please be sure to check out his new activity books based on the AnnaLynn the Canadian Spy series. Also want to thank our sponsors, Diana Rangaves. Please be sure to check out Rosie Posey Papillon. Theodore's Plate, written by Stephen Wade Nebgen. And, of course, we want to encourage you to check out My Home by Heather Fontaine Youngs. My team deserves a great big thank you. Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Nicole Belcastro, Ashley Contouris. My beautiful wife deserves a huge thank you for all of her support. Most of all, we think that you deserve a big thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.